Hello there, you join me on what is a very nice day. It's been raining for the last few days, but today should be quite nice. I'm at Slimbridge Wildfowl Centre. I've got the 100-400 lens on again, and I'm going to try to do some more birds. That's the whole point of the trip today. We'll see how we got on. I'll see you after this. When we started out this morning, it was really bright, harsh sun. When we got in the car this morning, it was bright, harsh sun. Now it's really quite overcast, and there was a moment when we got actually into Slimbridge where the light was bright enough, but there was enough cloud cover that we had really bright shots, and we could take these lovely photos of birds flying in at 1,000, 2,000 shutter speed. Unfortunately, no birds flew into our shots. However, it's not been too bad. There's tons and tons of geese here today. I might have got one flying shot with a goose, but that was pure fluke if that's what actually happened. It's quite good. You know, there's still quite a lot to see. There's geese that are kind of chasing one another over there as well. So it's getting a little bit loud here too. Settings wise, I'm using the same settings that I suggested in the previous video where I said these are my bird photography settings, and actually I seem to be getting some good results from that. So hopefully I'll be able to show one or two of them on screen in a few minutes. What I'm really here for, what I'm really hoping to get, they had some herons and they had some cranes last time, and I don't think that I quite got the best shots of them. I also have with me today, if I can do it one-handed, if I can bring it out-handed, this, which I wanted to try out. Now, this is the Teleconverter, the 1.4? Yeah, the 1.4 times Teleconverter, which goes on the back of my lens. And again, should give me a little bit of extra reach. Not so important where we were, which was a lot of swans and stuff, and you can pretty much get the sort of shots that you want. More important when you are looking at a bird which is quite a way in the distance. And of course, the other thing about the Teleconverter is that it does make, because each lens has a sweet spot, the Teleconverter does mean that the sweet spot of your lens ends at around the sort of a 400 mark instead of sort of ending at around maybe the 300 mark. So you've got a little bit of extra reach, or you can push it that little bit more. I have got some good shots. I have got some shots that at the moment I'm pleased with, but I'm going to have to get back into Lightroom to actually see whether or not there's anything I want to keep. Of course, there is the other big thing that you can do in Lightroom, in Photoshop now, I should say, coming to Lightroom soon, and that's the new enhance features, which lets you it's not double the size, it's double the size and then double it again, so 4x the size of your pictures. And I've done that on a couple of occasions, and it's absolutely phenomenal. It gives you some really great shots. Crucially, the thing that it's going to allow you to do with wildlife photography, with birds in particular, especially when they're small ones, is to zoom in just a little bit more, just to get a little bit more out of that picture without having to have a 50 meg or 100 meg camera in order to do it. Next, we're going that way, where we haven't been before, where apparently there's some hides if they still let you in there, and that might be where we start to get some shots. Unfortunately, because I'm trying to travel as light as possible, I've got a heavy lens with me, I haven't got a tripod with me, so I can't show you any of these shots, but I'll try and explain what's going on as I get back.
And here we have the first shot of the day. When I started editing these, I was really impressed with how sharp they were, and that was thanks in part to the higher shutter speed, slowing down any action in the frame. With this first image of swans, we were hoping that they'd make that classic heart shape, but they didn't quite get that far. Nevertheless, it's a nice image that I really like. And even though this is called Swan Lake, there are plenty of ducks and geese on the pond as well. Here's one that decided to perch on a tree, of all things. Not a natural position for a duck, but she seemed pretty happy where she was. One of the best bits of the first lake at Slimbridge is the chance to see birds flying. Now, there wasn't a great deal of birds around, but I did get this goose landing. Actually, I got a few of these shots as he was coming into land, all of which I was very pleased with. It does go to show that you don't have to rely on tripods or monopods, even if you're carrying around one of these heavier lenses. Now, they can help an awful lot, but it's not the end of the world if you have to handhold these types of shots, and as you can see, these were perfectly sharp.
Well, we've just been to a hide. Not my first time in a bird hide, but my first time using the teleconverter with this lens, and actually it was really simple to do. It gives you a little bit of extra reach, like I said, but it's not. It's not a cure-all. You know, if you haven't got the rest of it right first, it's not going to help you at all. Unfortunately, there's not a lot flying today, which means that there were fewer opportunities to take flying birds, which means we didn't see very many flying birds, which means I still haven't got those flying bird shots that I was after. But it was a nice little stop, and hopefully, well, we never know, maybe a little bit further round, we'll see something else. The day's actually turning out to be quite nice. It's a little bit overcast, and maybe ideally I'd like to have something which is a little bit brighter, but you can't have everything, and when you live in Britain, these are kind of the conditions that you have to live by. Anyway, a little bit further around there's another hide, and often that's where you see herons and cranes, so I'm hoping that maybe we'll get a shot of one of those. We'll see how it goes anyway.
Here's one of the images I got with the teleconverter on, and if you look closely you can see that it's not quite as sharp as the other images I've got that day. But there's a level to which that is still acceptable, and perhaps sometimes we focus so much on the technicalities of our photos that we miss the artistry in them. Around this area were also flamingos. Now, I quite like flamingos, but there are better chances to take them at Birdland, which was actually one of the first videos that I made on this channel. So I was a little selective in the flamingos that I took that day, and all I really got was this shot, but I am happy with it. Whilst that wasn't the day over, unfortunately for us, disaster struck.
The last time you saw me, I was actually inside Slimbridge, and you will have noticed that I have decamped to the car, and there is good reason for that, because you might be able to see through the window. It is tipping down with rain. Now, we were at the Flamingos the last time that we talked. Whilst I was at the hides, I actually had a chance to try the 1.4 times teleconverter first time that I've done that, and actually looking at the results that I've had, I'm not entirely sure that I've got the best results from using the teleconverter. Yes, it's a lot closer, actually. You can see a significant difference between what is essentially 400mm and 560. So you're going in quite a way, but it's a little bit soft. And I think even, I don't know, maybe you'd need to have a boost in the aperture, maybe push that up a little bit. But of course, every time you do something like that, you're losing a little bit more light and a little bit more light. The 1.4 times teleconverter takes about half a stop of light off, so you're going at f8, which isn't bad. But if you then want to use the sort of 1000 shutter speed, then you're going to have to use a much higher ISO, and that in itself is going to degrade the image a little bit as well. So it's a toss-up between the two. Sometimes that extra reach is going to be very useful. I can see that happening clearly. But sometimes I think if I can avoid it, then not having the extra reach, just using the 400mm, is going to give me 90% of the shots that I'm after. Perhaps not some of the birds in flight shots, but again, I'm a little away from actually being able to get those at the moment. Birds in flight is not something that I've done a lot of. I've done a bit, and I've had some good results from it, but it's still something that I need to have a lot of practice with. I'm considering sort of trying a few other places out so I can actually go and try birds in flight. I've thought for a long time, actually, what photographers could really do with is like a shooting range for photographers, where you get things moving around above you and you get targets and things, and you could practice with your long lenses. I did actually have somebody talk to me earlier on Twitter earlier in the week who said he just got one of the 100 to 400mm lenses and was noticing that it was a little bit or not quite as sharp as he was wanting. It's a little bit soft. And I said, well, I've not really had that much of a problem. It does happen occasionally, but that tends to be user error. And I think between us, we've kind of had the same conclusion, actually, that it can be user error. And using a much longer focal length lens takes slightly different skills from using the sorts of lenses that we're all used to, anything up to about 300mm. So very interesting day. I should point out as well, as the rain is still coming down, my mother came with me today, and we had some very interesting takes between what I would have got with a 400mm lens and what she got with a 200mm lens. So again, that's that, 2 times more zoom, what you can do with it. And it's really something that I think that we're kind of looking towards that 70 to 300 when it's available, because it's still not actually available yet. I think some pre-orders have had it, and a lot of people want it, so there's very few actual copies of that lens in the UK at the moment. But I think that perhaps I might revise some of my opinions on that 70 to 300mm. I might think, actually, if you're into wildlife but you don't want to carry around the weight of the 400, actually that's much more of a better lens to go for than the 200. Partly because that distance between 50mm and 70mm, that's taking a step forward. That's just, one step forward and you've got that focal range covered. And if your other lens is the 18 to 55 or the 16 to 50, I think it is, then you're not going to have too many instances where you go, oh, well, that precise shot isn't one that I can get. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting that lens at some point, and I will definitely do a video. Somebody already has asked if I'm going to do a video on it. Well, as I said, it's nowhere available at the moment. When it is, I'm going to try and get hold of a copy, and we will see what we can do. And just as we were about to go up into the main hide, it absolutely tipped with rain. Really, really bad. So we sheltered for a little bit, and we went to see the first hide, which was interesting enough, but I didn't really get the sorts of pictures that I wanted. I did get some good pictures from the earlier part of the evening, the morning, and hopefully you'll have seen some of those by now. Haven't edited the video yet, obviously. But that second hide, to be honest, there wasn't a lot around. And this is one of the problems that you have if you're going to do anything with wildlife. You can go there at what you think is roughly the right time, but there's a good chance that actually you might miss it. That actually the wildlife won't be there that day. You've got to be very, very patient if you want to take photos of wildlife. Slimbridge, places like Slimbridge are good because there is a concentration of birds in a particular area. But you don't always get the ones you want. Even the lake that we went to, the very first Swan Lake, I think they call it, where all the swans and all the geese are, even that isn't always as full. It doesn't always have flying birds coming in or birds landing. And a lot of the time you want to take birds landing or birds in flight or something like that. And they're not always there because migratory patterns happen, and sometimes they go somewhere else for a period of time. It's very difficult to kind of test what that is. Anyway, after we went to that hide, there was another hide a little bit later on. No pictures from that one either. Similar sort of thing, nothing much there. But then we went up to have lunch, and we were really, really lucky at that point, because as we sat down, some of the geese, and there were little goslings with them as well. They're running around all over the place with the mothers and fathers and babies and everything. They came and sat with us, and I managed to get a few pictures of these goslings playing in some water.
This was probably the highlight of the day, seeing the goslings in the puddles. At first it was raining, and you can see the splashes of water in the shot, which I think adds something to the dynamics of the image. The second image, I have to say, isn't quite sharp, and that was largely due to me not being able to use a high enough shutter speed. This had just happened in front of us, and it was very much a case of grabbing the camera and getting what we could as we could get it. But this is another misconception of photography. The image is the important thing. Some of the most famous photographs are not quite sharp, not quite exposed properly. But that's not why they're popular. They work because they create emotions in us, and hopefully that's what I've got here. As the rain stopped, I did manage to get a few shots of the goslings reflected in puddles too, and one shot that was my favourite from the day, which actually you'll see at the end of the video. The edit on this image was a little bit tricky, as I didn't want the water to just look like a horrid shade of brown, but unfortunately there's not much you can do about that. I do think it looks a little more acceptable than it did on the original, however.
And so after lunch, we were left with a little bit of a dilemma. What do we do? Do we keep going up to the Kingfisher hide, or do we go back to the car? And again, we'd had another bit of torrential rain, and the weather at the moment is an awful lot like April showers in May, only with sheet lightning. We had sheet lightning, we had forked lightning. It was... I mean, we haven't had weather like that here for quite some time. So it was a bit of a surprise to get quite that level of weather. Whilst we were at the location, and the weather forecast for the day before said it would be quite nice, whilst we were at the location, they issued a yellow weather warning for that place for the day. So we could have just come back then, but we did try and go on to see the Kingfishers. And unfortunately, with Kingfishers, they're nesting at the moment as well, sometimes you have to wait a long time for them. We weren't too sure of the weather, so when we got there, we waited about 20-30 minutes. They weren't there, and so we decided to come away. On the way back, however, we did stop by a little pond, and I did manage to get a few more shots of the birds. And unfortunately for me, that's kind of where I had to leave the day. I would have loved to have spent a little bit more time around that Swan Lake at the beginning, because that's where you tended to get birds taking off and landing. That's where the more interesting pictures of the day, I think, came from this time round. Certainly not the case every time. The last time there was a lake with herons in and with cranes, and that was more interesting for that particular visit, but for this one, the lake with the swans in actually made a really great stop, and I've got the best pictures of the day, I think, from that and from lunch. So actually, it was a successful day. It was enjoyable. We got some pictures. I've actually got a picture that I think might do well in a competition if I can find a relevant competition. So it's well worth doing. As for the lens and the camera combo, I've spent a long time playing with the settings of the camera to a point where I'm relatively happy to turn something on and to just let the camera do most of the work for me. And I think the results are showing that works. The shots that I'm getting now are sharper than the shots that I've got before. I'm able to play with the framing a little bit more. I'm able to go a little bit more beyond the technical aspect of taking a camera and holding it and using that lens. And of course, we've been locked away for a lot of the year, so I haven't had a lot of chance to use this lens. Well, this is one of those chances to kind of see how I'm doing after a year with it and with the new equipment and everything. And I think it's turned out pretty well. I'm pretty pleased anyway. That's going to be it for this video, but there is one or two more pictures that I just want to show you before we go. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'll see you next time.
I actually have two favourite pictures from today's shoot. This is the first. It's another of the goose coming into land. There were three images that I pulled out of that one moment, but the one where it's actually touching down on the water is definitely my favourite. I'm actually discovering a few new ways to edit birds, and I do think that every subject has subtle ways that you can manipulate the edit to give the subject more of an impact. Now, I promised to show you my favourite gosling image earlier on, And here it is. I'm going to call this one Chicks in a Row, and I do think that it might be worth entering, maybe into a competition, or perhaps this could work for a greeting card. We'll see. Well, that's it for today's video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have had a lovely time making it despite the rain. If you've liked what you've seen here, please give me a big thumbs up, and if there's anything that you'd like to know, or if you just feel like it, please do leave a comment below. Finally, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon at the end, and you'll get notified every time I release a new video. I'll see you later in the week for our weekly chat. It's another Instagram video this week, I think. Until then, thank you ever so much for watching, and keep taking those photos.